morning, everybody, and welcome
Right.
to our March meeting. We're already at record numbers, 60 people in. That's incredible. We have got a packed agenda as ever. So if I hand over to Kevin, he'll start in a sec. If I can just tell you, we're trying a new little technology trick this morning. Every now and again, you'll see a poll pop up onto the screen for you to answer. So don't think that it's someone taking over your computer, but we're just trying to get a bit more interactive in the meeting. So if that pops up, if you can just answer it, we'd be very grateful. There you go. And there's the first one, right on time. It's very slick. Okay, Kevin, I'll hand over to you, I think.
Thanks very much. I'm just answering the poll. There we go. All done. So good morning, everybody. And yes, as Lorna said, I think it's great to see these networking events growing in popularity. I think we had well over 100 people registered, and good that we're at 60 already. So good morning to all. I'll just give you a quick update on some of the key developments with Maritime UK, and then we'll move on into the agenda. The agenda after me, we're very fortunate that we have a speaker from Maritime UK to talk about diversity in maritime. And then the other key update this morning is on Freeports, where, as you, I'm sure, saw from the media, the Solent was successful in its bid to become a Freeport, and Stu Baker from the LEP will update on what that actually means. So in terms of Maritime UK, for those of you not familiar, this was Maritime UK was originally formed as a joint group working between the industry and the government, particularly DfT, BEIS, and international trade. But it was linked to the UK Chamber of Shipping, and the decision's now been made to actually separate it away, and it's going to become incorporated in its own right. And the first board meeting of the new company is actually taking place on the 24th, so it gives it its own identity as such. Some of the key initiatives, just to make you aware of, I think at the last meeting we spoke about the Clean Maritime Demonstration Competition, where DfT were consulting about what that competition would be, what form it would take. They've concluded that consultation, and the competition will formally launch on the 29th of March. And I know we had a number of organisations in the region who are interested in bidding into that £20 million pot for support of them actually demonstrating moves towards low emissions. So we'll circulate that information once it becomes available. Some of the other areas that the Maritime UK is very active in at the moment is it's bidding to be able to exhibit at the COP26 climate conference to be held in November. Don't know yet whether it'll actually be successful in getting a place to be able to exhibit, but that's the intent. There's a lot of work going on in terms of national shipbuilding strategy. Again, this is one of the Prime Minister's themes for helping the building of the UK economy, and shipbuilding is key to that. Obviously, on the military side, there's been quite a lot of activity, but there's work as well to extend that into commercial shipping as well. And then just to touch on a couple of the key areas as well. So the Maritime Skills Commission is now very active, and Lorna is very involved as well in the career outreach section as well. Further work to input to the comprehensive spending review, a joint bid with DfT for securing funding for that. And then the final thing I just wanted to mention was, and I'm sure you saw some of the coverage, but a lot of work was done to support International Women's Day, And I think there was a very comprehensive media campaign demonstrating the success, but still a long way to go in terms of women in the maritime industry. So lots happening, many fronts, and as I say, I'm delighted that we have Chrissie coming to speak this morning on the subject of diversity. I think that was it, Lorna, in terms of Maritime UK. You're on mute, Lorna.
The first time today, first of many, obviously. I don't know if anyone's got any questions that they want to raise with Kevin following that little update. If not, we can pick up with those later on in the meeting. I can't see any hands raised, so I think we'll move on. So my colleague Chrissie is with us. Chrissie and I are both programme managers with Maritime UK, and she has responsibility for, there she is, haven't seen her face this morning yet. Morning, Chrissie. She has responsibility for the skills and diversity programme. So we've given her 20 minutes on the agenda. She's going to talk a little bit about her programmes, and then there's going to be lots of time available for you guys to ask questions. And Chrissie's going to tell you about how you can get involved with her programme. So Chrissie, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna. Good morning, everybody. I thought I'd just quickly give you a quick who I am, and then I'm going to share some slides. I know sharing slides isn't always great because sometimes you can't see the person, so I'll put a few up and then take it off and have lots of time for questions. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Chrissie Clarke. I'm the Programme Manager for Diversity and Skills at Maritime UK. And I was brought in a year ago, almost to the day, initially on a one-year contract to build the Diversity in Maritime programme and act as Secretary to the Maritime Skills Commission. And I'll be honest, I have a massive passion for diversity and inclusion, and it was actually triggered about 14 years ago whilst I was working in the arts. I was very fortunate. I worked for Andrew Lloyd Webber for a few years, and whilst awful on stage, I was finding that behind the scenes, there was just lots of men in leadership positions, and where were the females, and where was the inclusion? And this really kind of triggered my interest. I then actually moved to Australia for about 12 years, and this further cemented my passion for diversity and inclusion and skills. And I was very fortunate to work delivering and embedding these sort of strategies and programs through a range of different sectors, but in particular mining, property, and the Australian government. And I was finding a lot about the STEM skills during this time and transferable skills, and I wanted to know more. And whilst working in Sydney, as you probably understand, Sydney has a very strong maritime presence. And a lot of colleagues were worked in the Australian Navy, had worked on ferries, had worked on cruise ships. And it was a sector I was really interested to find out more about. So fast forward a few years, and I was very lucky to get this role at Maritime UK. And I'll be honest, I have so much to learn about this sector, but it's something I absolutely love learning about. So why was I brought into Maritime UK? So fabulous foundations had been laid by the Women in Maritime Task Force. But as we know, when we start to look at one area of diversity, automatically we start to have conversations about other areas of diversity and inclusion. And as a recommendation in the Maritime 2050 People Route Map, it was now is the time, great foundations have been laid, but you need to now look at other areas of diversity. But as a sector, we want to ensure we're inclusive, but also that current and future employees have the skills that they need to enter and progress into the workplace, which is why I also look after the Maritime Skills Commission. So hopefully I won't mess this up. I'm just going to share my screen with a couple of slides. Okay. Lonnie, can you tell me if that looks okay? Okay. Hopefully it doesn't say next slide. I haven't just messed that up, but do let me know if I have. Okay, so I'm obviously very fortunate to work very closely with Lorna, and we want to make sure that all our Maritime UK people programmes are very strongly aligned. We can't do one without the other. So the Maritime Skills Commission acts as that strategic kind of body to look at current and future skills trends and needs. But that also needs to feed in with the Diversity and Maritime Task Force and also the Careers Task Force. And whilst today I will talk mainly about the Diversity Task Force, I will include a link at the end to the Maritime Skills Commission and also my email address and very happy to have a conversation about what we're doing in that field at any time. So where do you start to build a diversity in maritime program with not much data? We knew that there was very limited data with gender diversity. We knew there was approximately 3% women at sea. We knew it was slightly higher in shore-based, but then obviously sometimes with the data and the insights, it doesn't always give us exactly what we need, because then it does include people working in hospitality. So without the data, you really need to look very strongly at engagement. And so how I looked to set this up was, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to understand great conversations that are happening already. And we want to understand what conversations have been organically coming up through the Women's Network. So we started to say, well, let's shine a spotlight on 2 other areas to start with, because diversity and inclusion is so big. We want to make sure that everybody has that equal seat at the table. But if we start to shine a spotlight on too many areas, we do run the risk of diluting the conversation. So first of all, we activated mental health and pride as our next 2 networks. And I just put up the structure here of how I've set it up. And a structure should never be a barrier, but it should help to facilitate the discussion. So we also then activated an ethnicity network last year. Our networks operate as safe spaces. They bring together people from those protected characteristics, or in terms of the mental health, people that have the responsibility for looking after mental health and well-being in their workplace, but also allies, because we know that allies are absolutely critical in this piece. So we have the 4 current networks. Now, we know that within the networks, we are going to start to discuss what's working at the moment, what best practices are already there, what can we signpost to, but importantly, where gaps are happening, what can we do to start fixing these gaps and start progressing forward? But we also want to make sure we're not working in silos. We want to make sure we're looking where appropriate in an intersectional space. So that's why we have working groups, and the working groups live across the piece. So we have one that looks at recruitment, one that looks at retention and progression, one that looks at communications and events, and one that looks at our pledges and our charter. And I'll go through this a little bit more in a second. And then the chairs of those working groups and those networks all form a task force. And the reason for that is to make sure we are always moving forward, that we're always talking together, and we're understanding the conversations that are coming out through the networks and the challenges. So I've just put up a quick link to our next network meetings. Our networks meet every quarter. They are very much open, as I say, to all, and we would love to see you all at those network meetings. You can dip in and dip out. You don't get actions, but we always do send wrap-ups. Importantly, we never share recordings of our network meetings. They do need to operate as a safe space, and our network participants need to feel safe to come in and be able to challenge the status quo at those meetings. So again, I'll put that in the chat afterwards. So I thought I'll just focus a little bit on the current initiatives and then move more into time for Q&A. So 2 weeks ago, we launched our Mental Health in Maritime Pledge, and it's been fabulous to see so many of you get involved with that, and I thank you. That is that public commitment from the top to really make sure as a sector, we're progressing the conversation about mental health and wellbeing provisions. And by signing up to that pledge, you're helping us shine a spotlight on such an important issue. We also continue to shine a spotlight on our Women in Maritime Gender Pledge, and that was launched through the Women in Maritime Network a number of years ago. We want to make sure that conversation is not diluted. What are we doing with these pledges? Well, we're using them as a stepping stone to become a diversity in maritime charter organisation. And to me, the charter is a lot of where the magic happens, because that's when organisations need to go into a data portal and put where you're up to with your gender conversation at the moment, and where do you want to get to in 5 or 10 years' time. And also 2 weeks ago, I soft launched the expanded charter, which now looks at where you're up to with your D&I journey. Are you starting having conversations about other areas of diversity? But it needs to be a two-way shop. And so as a program, we need to support you. So we do ask that charter organisations develop an action plan. You've got this data, you know where you want to get to, but how are you going to get there? And importantly, what can we do to support you to get there? Morning, Pixie. Okay, so then another program we've got, which is the interview pool. And this came out of conversations with some of our charter organisations, that we know that especially the smaller maritime organisations sometimes struggle to have diversity on interview panels. And what can we do to support them? So the interview pool was developed, and we have a pool of women who are there to support organisations who can't have access to diversity. Now, with that, we're actually going to be launching an unconscious and conscious bias toolkit to really help those conversations to be expanded on interview panels, to make sure that whoever comes into that interview feels like they can be their authentic self. We've got a speaker bank, and at the moment that is really looking at making sure that organisations and conferences have access to women to speak, maybe London International Shipping Week, maybe conferences, maybe events, but we are going to be expanding that now as well to make sure it really does link in with all of our other networks. We have toolkits, and through one of our mental health projects, we are now going to be expanding those toolkits to also include mental health and wellbeing strategies and guides and apps as well. And that feeds into our culture of care. We want to make sure that when we're talking about mental health and wellbeing, we are creating a culture of care. And yesterday we ran our first webinar talking about that and the lived experiences of people within the maritime sector. And I will be sharing a link to that webinar later today. We've also got some network specific initiatives happening at the moment, with a number more in the pipeline. We've launched an Ethnicity and Maritime book club, and that book club meets approximately every 6 weeks, and that's for people to come together and talk about the history of race and to challenge it and to understand it, but also it's another way to engage, especially when we've been in lockdown. It's so important to be able to engage in different ways rather than just meetings. We are shortly going to be launching an LGBT plus industry roundtable to understand what conversations are being had about LGBT plus around the maritime sector. And all going well, we're really hoping that Pride in London is going to be going ahead this year. It's due to be held the weekend just before London International Shipping Week. So we're starting to make plans for that, which we know will be in a physical but also a virtual environment. So how can you get involved? Well, please join the networks. We'd love you to join the working groups, and I can see a few of you on this call who are part of those working groups, and I thank you for being part of them. Sign up for the initiatives. They're here to support you. Follow us on social media. I have the Diversity in Maritime page on LinkedIn and also MUK Diversity on Twitter. And we're also looking for sponsors for the programme to make sure we are sustainable going forward. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'll stop sharing my slides just so I can see everyone again. But now I'd love to have any questions. And I can see some that have come in the chat. Oh, wonderful. Andrew, thank you so much for that. And Will, thank you for putting a link up to Diversity in Maritime. Does anybody have any initial questions? Feel free to either take yourself on mute or put it in the chat. I am aware I'm coming close to the end of my time. I don't want to waffle at you all, but also I'd love to know if there's anything more I can be telling you about the programs. I'll also take silence as being good.
See, can I make a start then? So I put something in the chat just before you started speaking, but it's really become very relevant given what I've heard you say. So I lead an initiative called the National Skills Academy Maritime, particularly focused on shipbuilding, which is in for Treasury funding at the moment, and we find out in April whether we've got Treasury funding for a National Academy for Skills for Shipbuilding across all the UK nations, including the devolved governments.
Yeah.
Really what you described today will be a great interface into the work that we would be undertaking under that National Skills Academy banner for shipbuilding.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, the funding model is or the work model is such that if we get funded, it'll happen. If we don't get funded, nothing will happen. So if we get funded and the decision made in April, then it would be really great to get in contact to discuss how your work could dovetail very neatly and provide a real great impetus for the work that we're doing under that Academy banner.
Absolutely. I have to say, Andrew, I'm so excited about this. The second Sea Lord is one of the commissioners, and he tabled this as a high-level strategy at our January meeting. I actually wrote a letter of endorsement for the feasibility study from the Maritime Skills Commission as well, and have been lucky to speak to Al Uk about this as well. We absolutely believe that it can be a fabulous collaboration tool and really kind of take the sector forward. So I'm certainly keeping everything crossed.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's being presented at the shipbuilding conference today by Richard Westgarth.
Perfect. Oh, that sounds so good. Well, I'm keeping everything crossed, and I'm hoping that the second Sea Lord is going to come and speak about it at our April Maritime Skills Commission meeting. And we've also, just so you know, just to follow on from that, have been having discussions with the similar model that's happening in rail. And I know that was in the bid as a potential model to kind of look at. And through the Skills Commission, we're trying to understand how they're doing their data modelling for skills. If that's something we can do through the maritime sector, which then feed in hopefully really nicely into the National Skills Academy for Maritime Shipbuilding, should the funding come through. So fabulous. And I'd love to kind of keep in touch with you, Andrew, about that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's the Skills Academy Rail will be, in order to give us a sort of a leg up and a kickstart, we'll be incubating, if we get funded, we'll be integrating the maritime equivalent. So we'll be able to build upon all of their data. And I was interested by your data. I think on your first opening slide, you talked about a lack of data. One of the things that the Academy Maritime will do is try and bridge that gap between supply and demand skills.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely brilliant.
For the sector, women are so critical to developing the skills base, both onshore and at sea. And therefore, as I say, you know, integrating your work will be so beneficial.
Oh, it'd be absolutely great to be able to collaborate and really kind of progress this forward. Thank you. Is there any other questions? I will put my email in the chat. So if anyone's got any questions afterwards, they want to know more about the Skills Commission or the Diversity Programme, always feel free to drop me an email. Or you can also contact me through LinkedIn. Always happy to share what we're doing. I am aware that I'm coming to the end of my time. So I do want to thank you all. It was lovely to be here today and to present to you. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Chrissie. So any other questions that might come up through the morning that you want me to redirect to Chrissie, I can do that. I would just say, you know, the way that my work with Maritime UK nationally fits into this as well, because we're prioritising, or will be prioritising, careers information and prioritising and highlighting particular skills gaps once we've got that data. We're dealing with things anecdotally at the moment, and it needs to be a bit more robust. But yeah, fantastic, Chrissie. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got a couple of, oh no, they're just messages from you. I thought this was going to be other questions. Okay. We've got a poll, folks, that's going to appear on the screen in a moment, which I would appreciate your answering. It shouldn't take very long. This is so high tech for us, it's unbelievable. And we're at 68 people in the meeting. I'm wondering if we might get to 70. I think the secret for this is that, you know, Maritime UK and Chrissie's work will be led by the sector and by industry, and you know, the more that you can contribute in terms of getting involved with these working groups or the networks, or encouraging people within your organisation to access the information and networking opportunities that are out there, the better. Yes, but slightly more can be done. We'll take that, won't we, Chrissie? Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. I love these polls, Will. You're a superstar. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next thing on the agenda. Brilliant. Okay, so I wanted to, the next little bit that I was going to talk about actually is what we've got coming up in the way of meetings over the next couple of months. So last month we did our first networking event. We said that because you all enjoyed that so much, we would run that again, and we'll do that one every 3 meetings. So the next networking meeting will be in May. I think we can accommodate comfortably 8 speakers in our hour and a half. So if you're a maritime business and you're out there and you would like to share a little bit more information with the wider network about what you do, the history of your business, the outlook for you in the future, perhaps new products or services that you're launching. It's very much a networking event. One day we will get back to being in a position where these sorts of meetings can happen in a shared space with coffee and croissants. I keep promising that, don't I? So we'll have to come up with that when it actually happens. But for now, they have to be virtual. So if you're interested in being a speaker about your business, I appreciate there's a lot of people attend these meetings, but you can have 5 or 6 minutes on the agenda just to talk to us about your business, so we can all learn more about the maritime community locally. Will would very much like to hear from you, and we'll start building a list. The only condition is that you are a maritime business and that you have business interests in the Solent. Next month, we're going to change things slightly, and we're going to look at the visitor economy. So there may be people in this meeting that would like to be speakers on that day. I have already made a couple of approaches to local businesses, but I think with the COVID restrictions lessening and things starting to open up again, and the huge part that the visitor economy plays to our economy locally, I think it's a good time to talk about that. So April, we'll be looking at the visitors economy, and May, it will be networking. So that's your homework really, for you to come back to us. And brilliant, 30% of you have said you'd like to be a future meeting. Will, I think that's us sorted for our speakers. The other thing we were going to say is that the Maritime UK Solent has a LinkedIn, has a Twitter account. Will and I both have LinkedIn accounts. If you haven't already connected with us on social media, we'd really like you to do that, so we can share information that way with you. I don't think there was anything else on my little list then, so we're running a little ahead of time, which is good for us. I wonder if we can go straight over to the main event for today. Stu, are you there? Are you ready to take over the screen?
He's joining now.
Lovely. Can you all see the poll results there? I'm not sure I did that the last time, Will, did I? Possibly. So Stu's just on his way in. 69 people in the meeting. We're really excited if I got that to 70. Doesn't take a lot, but there you go. Here we go. We have Stu. Thank you for joining us, Stu. The screen is all yours.
Oh, is it? Oh, crikey. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
that was good
so.
timing. I was down to kind of 45. So, okay. That was just as well, wasn't it? Yeah. Apologies. I'm a few minutes late then. It's school drop off this morning. So just juggling a few things. Right. Let me try and share my screen. I've got a polling thing in front of me, Lorna. Can I just X that out the way? Or is this? Yeah. Brilliant. Right. Just do that. Right. Share screen.
Sorry, we're running a bit ahead of time, Stu, this morning.
Okay, that's cool, no problem at all. Right, that's good. Right, is that showing for everybody?
Yep, it's good, Stu. Morning.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, Kevin. All right. Okay, can you see a screen that's got the whole thing on, or just the slideshow bit?
We're seeing you and your opening slide.
We've got your full slide with QM2.
Perfect. Excellent. Good. That's perfect then. Right. Okay. Right. Thank you. Right. Morning, everybody. Apologies for the slight technical issue there, but it looks as though we're all going. Yeah. Just wanted to give thought it was an opportune time to give an update on the Freeport. Solent Freeport bid that was successful, announced in the budget by the Chancellor on the 3rd of March. Incredibly exciting. A lot of work went into it. And yeah, massive relief right at the end of the budget when we heard those words, because we genuinely had no idea before that we were going to be successful, or the extent of the announcement as well. There is still a lot of work to do, and it's very early stages. So I will apologise in advance for the sort of high-level nature of the slide deck, and also you'll probably have some questions that are just unable to answer at this stage, because there's still, as I said, there's still a lot of work to do, to work through with government and partners to identify the specific form and function of the Solent Freeport. But it's moving at pace, and I'll try and talk as broadly as I can and give you as much information as I can about it. But I just wanted to sort of say that in the first instance. So what I'll cover in this presentation really is, what is a Freeport? What are the advantages to the Solent economy? Why were we so interested in this? How was our bid developed? What our proposal is, and that's the bit that's going to be a bit light. And then the next steps as well, which again are fairly light as well, but that's because it's only just been announced. So just moving in. So, I mean, Freeports, they really are a sort of flagship government program. And I think it was quite telling how the Chancellor introduced them as part of the budget. He saved it to the end, and sort of, seemed to be talking about these as though they really were a key plank of the government's policy for global Britain and levelling up the economy. Two of those key phrases we keep hearing. I think there was an integrated review that came out yesterday that talked again about levelling up the UK and the whole of the UK, and sort of positioning the UK strategically as a global trading nation as we emerge sort of from the EU. So a real key policy for the Chancellor in particular. It's really good that we are actually part of that. They are, Freeports, they're not just seaports. I think that's the key thing. They were air and rail ports. I think, they put rail ports in the prospectus, but they were never really likely to see too much of that. And certainly in the 8 that have been announced, there wasn't one. I think there was just one airport, which was East Midlands. The rest were seaports. Now, they originally expected to designate 10 Freeports across the whole of the UK, and that would be one in each of the devolved nations, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, and they'll be they're sort of taking their Freeports forward as devolved decisions if they choose to sort of go along those policy lines. I think there's some discussion in Scotland whether they want to have a Freeport or whether they're going to sort of rebrand them as green ports or a green port, but that's a decision for them. But certainly in England, which is the announcement that we had at the budget, there were 8 designated, which was a surprise. We expected a maximum of 7. We actually expected there to be quite a few more than 7 announced, to go through to a next stage of development where, following a sort of quality assurance process, the government would say, okay, we really like these bids and these are the ones we're going to designate. But it would appear from the Chancellor's announcement that 8 will be designated, subject to agreeing their sort of governance and their form with government. So they're not all in. They're not definitely going to be Freeports, but they're certainly, there doesn't appear to be a competition anymore. You are through to the next phase, and essentially, if you tick the boxes and can agree amongst yourselves and also with government, then a Freeport will be designated. The Freeport model aims to achieve 3 objectives. So national hubs for global trade and investment across the UK. And the lead policy objective is objective number 2 there, and this is around regeneration and job creation. And this is very much the levelling up aspect of them. And they will attract investment to specific localities, and that is how the government want to sort of use policy intervention, fiscal intervention to address levelling up, address getting the investment to the places that potentially have lagged behind. And often is the case that they have been coastal communities where a lot of these Freeports have been designated. And if you think about the sort of geographic spread of the Freeports that were announced, there's a pretty good spread around the country, and all of those areas broadly have specific socioeconomic challenges that these should be part of the basket of measures to address. government, and I think this is a prime ministerial intervention on this, is that they're quite keen for Freeports to be sort of pioneers of innovation as well. So it's really important that we get the private sector, research and development, and obviously our academic institutions involved and at the heart of these, so that we can innovate as part of Freeports. And that's not just innovation in terms of customs processes, digitization. It could be around sort of transition of maritime fuels, for example, as well. But it's very good that innovation will be part of these, and certainly will be part of our Freeport proposal, is part of our Freeport proposal, I should say. So in terms of what is a Freeport, a policy prospectus, bidding prospectus was published back, I think it was November the 16th last year, and bids needed to be in on the 5th of February, and with Christmas and New Year in between that, there wasn't a huge amount of time to do all the work that was needed to be done to land on a specific strong bid. So it's really, really important that the guidance that came forward from government was detailed, and it was incredibly detailed, actually, which was helpful. So the Freeport boundary, must be no more than 45 kilometres in extent. So there is a geographic specificity to them. Tax sites. If I sort of rewind then. So Freeports comprise tax sites and customs sites, and I'll talk about those a little bit more on one of the other slides. But essentially, tax sites for me are the sort of real exciting thing. I mean, you'll be familiar probably with enterprise zones. So there's one in the Solent Enterprise Zone at Daedalus, the former current airfield, in Gosport and Fareham, and this sort of enterprise zones have traditionally had sort of particular fiscal incentives to attract investment to them. Our enterprise zone has been very successful at doing that. It's had a significant amount of funding spent on it to upgrade the infrastructure, to sort of transform what was essentially a disused airfield into a sort of hub of business, private sector activity now, and training as well, with the CMAR Centre located down there. So tax sites are kind of like the enterprise zone element of Freeports. Within a Freeport, you can have a maximum of 3 tax sites within that 45 kilometre boundary, and the aggregate hectareage of those 3 sites is 600 hectares, so it can't exceed that. And then each of those tax sites within those 3 need to be between 20 and 200 hectares. So the government were quite clear, actually, that scale was important, bigger the better. So they wanted you to sort of get close to that 600 hectares, and that individual tax sites should be larger rather than smaller. And that was a clear steer. Tax sites should be underdeveloped as well, and located in areas with below average GDP per head and above average unemployment rates. So again, using tax sites as a way of addressing levelling up and supporting those sort of challenged communities as well, to give them a sort of brighter future, more employment opportunities, and to raise productivity levels. So quite specific in terms of the nature of the tax sites, and we worked with a consultancy called Vivid Economics, who are world leading in the development of free ports and free zones across the world. And we asked them to sort of do some independent work so we did a call for sites, a whole range of sites came in, and Vivid independently, objectively looked at those sites against the criteria, and recommended the strongest sites to come forward, as I'll talk about in a moment. The other aspects of free ports is custom sites as well, and within that you need to designate a primary custom site and then a number of custom subzones. Now the 45 kilometre boundary, you can in the future designate future custom subzones within that boundary, but the tax sites are set. You cannot change, you can't have more than the 3 that have been identified and agreed by government. But custom sites, if you want, you can introduce additional custom subzones in the future if required. Bidders must include at least 1 port of any mode within their free port. We were quite clear that, we've got a range of ports in the area, significant, obviously Port of Southampton, Port of Portsmouth in particular, but Solent gateways as well, the former, the military port on Southampton water as well as our 3 key port areas. We're pretty well blessed with ports that are of international significance. So advantages of Freeport. So I've talked about this to an extent, but just to sort of go into in a little bit more detail. Tax sites, the specific advantages that can accrue to those sites. So it's not saying that these sites will all get these fiscal incentives, because it all needs to be agreed with government, and I think government need to enact legislation as well to bring forward these incentives. But there can be business rates relief of up to 100% for specific businesses, specific sectors. It won't be all businesses that are located in tax sites, but it is an opportunity. Retention of business rates growth for 25 years by the local authorities or the rating authorities within which those tax sites are, and that funding can then be used as a revenue stream to reinvest in the Freeport, to strengthen the Freeports. That could be in innovation, it could be in skills and training, it could be in infrastructure. There is the potential for the government to pay national insurance contributions for the first £25,000 for each employee for 3 years of those tax sites, of businesses locating in the tax sites. Enhanced capital allowances, enhanced structures and buildings allowance, and stamp duty relief. These are all the things that were identified in the bidding prospectus published by government. So these are the range of incentives that tax sites could benefit from. In terms of customs sites, businesses operating within Freeport customs sites will receive tariff benefits, including duty deferral. This isn't my area of expertise, but I'm sure there's people on this Zoom that understand the particular benefits of the customs site. But lots of acronyms involved in customs sites, and yeah, a little bit too much for my small brain. But in terms of sort of more broadly, the government proposes that successful bidders will have the opportunity to access a share of £175 million of seed capital funding. So that works out to roughly 17 million per Freeport potentially, and prioritise access to sort of innovation funding as well. 175 million, across 8 Freeports that have been identified, plus others in the devolved nations, isn't a massive amount of money though, really, when you sort of start dividing it there, and the cost of some of the interventions. And I think there really is an expectation that the private sector will come forward with investment as well to complement. So I've talked about this, so I won't labour this, but the objectives there, which I mentioned, and I think the only bit that we've sort of added into this slide is what those objectives mean in terms of the outcomes that could be realised through Freeport. So clearly, increased trade or attractiveness of trade for the UK. They are aimed at crowding in new investment as well, and it's about new investment, not investment that's already there. That's quite clear, and I think evidence from elsewhere would suggest that the Freeport brand, the Freeport name, is attractive to investors. Obviously, looking to create jobs in terms of employment and raise productivity. And in terms of jobs, we're looking at around 50,000 new jobs that would be created, with about half within the Solent directly related to it, and the other half in the wider UK economy. That's sort of modelling output at this stage, but we'll be refining that in terms of the nature of those jobs as we get into the detail of the work. Looking at around sort of £2 billion of investment going in as well, potentially as well. But again, the detail needs to be worked up as we go through the remainder of the work. And in terms of creating hotbeds of innovation, with innovation, you get in, sort of more efficient, more effective processes, so productivity should improve as well. So in terms of the approach we took to developing a Freeport here in the Solent, I've talked about that to an extent, but I think it's important to say this is definitely not a Solent LEP proposal. It is a bidding coalition. That's what government wanted. They wanted bidding coalitions to come forward, and the LEP were asked as part of that to sort of provide that sort of coordination convening piece, and actually sort of take the submit the bid. We did that, and we paid for Vivid Economics, which was a good use of funding to sort of land this bid, which was obviously successful. We actually sort of got off on a strong start early on in terms of Freeports as soon as it became clear that this was going to be a sort of policy intervention coming forward from government. And back in October 2019, we did establish a Freeport Task and Finish group of a whole range of industry experts, ports, landholders, local authorities, academia, etc. That were able to give come forward and sort of talk about the kind of Freeport that might emerge in the Solent. Of course, that was in advance of the bidding prospectus, but as soon as that work, as soon as that was published, we obviously had the sort of parameters of the policy that we needed to work to. I talked about engaging Vivid Economics. I talked about the call for sites, and obviously stakeholder engagement is important through that process as well, because there are lots to this. We are not experts in sort of customs, for example, so we are very reliant on Vivid Economics and partners as well, who really are sort of experts in that arena. So in terms of our Freeport proposal, we kind of, what has been agreed by government is sort of 3 clusters of activity, one around the sort of water side, Southampton Port area, one around the airport, Southampton Airport, and one around sort of Portsmouth Port, going up to Dunsbury Park in Havant as well. The detail of the sites is something that needs to be agreed with government, so I can't really say any more than what you see on the slide there in front of you. I think what is important, and I think what is really what is particularly attractive about the Solent Freeport proposal are a sort of number of factors. One, you can see in the bottom right hand corner there how close the area is to the key international shipping lanes between Rotterdam and the Far East. Which even looking at the sort of review that was announced by the integrated review that was announced by government yesterday, they're talking about trade with India and the Far East as being a focus for the country. Well, we have the nearest deep water ports to that key international shipping superhighway, which is really important. Obviously, natural advantages around the sort of double tide, as it's called in Southampton water, gives longer berthing times. The existing infrastructure to cater for the world's largest container ships as well is a huge advantage. I think what I'd say also in terms of the levelling up agenda, and it's really important that is not lost here as well, that this area needs investment. It is an area that is not a typical southeast area by any stretches of the imagination. Indeed, it's more akin to northern conurbations in terms of a range of socioeconomic metrics. Just looking at the Isle of Wight there, that it has a productivity of per worker of 17% below the national average. I mean, that's massive. And we've got particular areas, Gosport in particular has been identified as an area of high need as part of government in the budget announcement on levelling up fund as well, a category 1 area here on the south coast. So I think what we have been doing, and I think this is down to probably a number of you on this call, and also ourselves as a LEP, is consistently engaging with government and reinforcing that point that this area does have challenges. It is not sunshine and affluence at all by any stretch of the imagination, and that this area really does need to benefit from the sort of UK-wide levelling up agenda, and I think this is a policy intervention that can go some way to supporting that. So next steps, and this is my final slide. So as I said, governance, that's the key thing. that government have said you need to sort out your governance, and once you do that, we can start speaking to you as an entity, and we can start giving you money as well to develop your proposal. So that's a key focus of work at this stage. Once we get to that stage, then, as I said, there is an opportunity to access seed capital funding to support key investments, and we'll be doing some work very, very rapidly to come forward with those. I think, whilst I guess the competition element has gone in terms of there are 8 Freeport areas that have been announced, I think the competition for the funding will be intense. There is a small pot of funding. I think government want Freeports to be up and running as soon as possible. I think those that come in with funding bids will be, that are strong will be agreed, and there could get to a stage that those that are lagging behind, there's no money left in the pot. So we need to work quickly as part of that. But it's a detailed process. We've got to go through a sort of 5-case Treasury compliant Green Book business case. That's not insignificant and certainly costs money as well. So there'll be quite a bit of work to do over the spring and summer on that. And then tax and customs sites within the Freeport will need to be agreed with, and this is all wording from government, agreed with Treasury, HMRC and Border Force, and tax site designation will require further evidence. So there is still a lot of work to do, and that's why, as I said at the sort of kickoff of the slide deck, it's not possible to sort of give you probably the detail that certainly we're getting a lot of questions by email and phone call, people wanting to know more, which is great because it is an exciting opportunity for the area, but we're just not in a position to give much more detail at this stage until we go through that next phase of work. So that was everything from me. I'll stop sharing the screen now, and happy to answer any questions that come up. Mark, I can see you've got your hand raised there.
Yes, Stu, thanks so much. Really good slide deck, really good presentation. Obviously, Portsmouth City Council and the port, and haven't we been very, very involved with this? And we just think the coalition has just been supreme. The working together, the partnership work has really driven this to success. And I was like you, hanging on every word of the Chancellor, and he waited to the end. And I got to say, I had shivers going down my back and all the rest of it. It's the first time I've ever had shivers go down my back during a budget statement. But anyhow, so I think it's just brilliant news for the Solent. Just a couple of quick questions, because you may know more now. The 175 million, I remember when they said to us that was divided by 7 or 8 because there was additional money for Scotland and Northern Ireland and all that. Has that changed now? So is it for all the Freeports that money's coming out of?
Yeah, I don't know is the answer, Mark. I mean, obviously, there's 8 Freeports, isn't there, that have been in the game now. I don't know what state all of those Freeports are in, and whether they will end up being Freeports. I genuinely don't know, but I just know how these things work from experience, that some of them fall away for whatever reasons. I mean, you've mentioned there how strong the coalition has been in the Solent, and that is a massive benefit for us, because if we're all singing off the same hymn sheet, we should be okay. But in other areas, and we've seen in our area, to be honest, in the past, where there can be conflict locally, and that can upset the apple cart and sort of mitigate against a successful bid. I don't think we've got that here, but I suspect it's inevitable it will happen in other areas. So that's why I think that money is there. I don't think it's a simple split between however many. I think it's survival of the strongest, really.
Yes, because that was really useful, because what you're saying is that if we put together a really good proposal for how we need to use a share of that 175 million, we get through the 5 case Treasury model, then potentially we could get a good solid chunk of that, and maybe more or less depending on the quality of the case we put forward for the investments that we need to get the Freeport going. So that's really useful to know, because I think with Vivid Economics, we've got a great consultant on board, and everybody's really passionate about it. So I think we can do that, and hopefully, we'll do it rapidly and do a really, really good job of it. So I think that's really positive.
Yeah.
The
no,
only other
agreed.
point I had was, is that £1 million capacity money that they said they'd give us straight away? Are we getting that immediately?
That's why we need to sort the governance out, Mark. That's why we don't get that till we sort the governance. So that's why the governance is the absolute priority to get through that, because they want to know who they speak to. They want to know that there is a legal entity in place who they can give that money to. That's the priority, and that's where the work has been, which is a bit, if I'm honest, I probably shouldn't say this, it's a little bit frustrating because we want to get on and do the, and do the exciting stuff. But, as always, the governance, whilst it might not be exciting, it is fundamental to it. So it's absolutely right. And that's, government have been clear. So sort your governance, then we'll have a chat with you about the money. So that's why the focus is on that.
Great. Thanks so much for that. Really
That's
useful.
okay.
Thank you. Thanks,
No
Stu.
problem. Any other questions? There's some stuff on the chat, so if I sort of open up that and I see, crikey, that's a long one, Paul. I don't know if anyone wants to say them rather than me sort of read through them, which I don't think ever really works through.
Mine's an answer to 2 of the questions. It's
not brilliant. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, just had a copy of the prospectus to hand.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Are there any other questions at all? I think I thought I saw another hand go up at some point. What I would say is that we would be delighted to sort of come back to this, as to keep you updated on this, because as I say, it is at an early stage. I would love to be in a position to say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, this is where it's going to be, but we're just not at that stage yet. I think what we want, we want this obviously to be a huge success, I think it's I've been working for the LEP for, I was looking at it yesterday, it's almost 10 years now, actually. There's been lots of policy interventions over the years. And this is the one that as soon as it came forward, I kind of really got quite excited about, because I thought it's just got the DNA of the Solent written all over it. We are an international gateway. We have phenomenal maritime assets that is second to none anywhere in the world, in my view. To have a sort of key policy intervention that addresses the socioeconomic challenges that we have in the area and leverages the key sectoral asset we have around maritime is just perfect for this area. It was, as I think, like Mark said, it was when the budget was announced, that last bit, it was a bit of a sort of fist pump in the air moment, which you don't always get doing this dull job. Ian, you got a hand up. How you doing?
Yeah, I think looking at some of the questions, I'm fine, thank you, Stuart, but looking at some of the questions, I think it's worth pointing out that the LEP have actually set up a whole PR group, got a PR machine that I think will, at certain points when some of this stuff gets rolled out and there's a little bit more understanding, will share a little bit more detail. So some of these questions will get answered then by way of announcements, and also presume normal kind of LEP releases that keep all their members informed. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. And I know Maritime UK Solent do a really good job of in the newsletter, which has got a really wide reach at the moment as well, of sort of relaying some of the LEP news as well. And certainly that will be a good vehicle for us to use. But we will be establishing, I hope this week, a micro site for the Solent Freeport as well, which will be a really good window to sort of provide information. Just I'm looking at the questions now, and Pam, hiya. I can see your question there. So in terms of existing businesses within the Freeport, so in terms of the fiscal incentives, you would need to be a business would need to be located in a tax site. So not just that sort of broader Freeport, it would need to be in the tax site. And in terms of retained rates locally, we will only have the ability to retain growth on existing business, because otherwise it's dead weight really, because that business is operating at the moment, it's doing something. But any sort of new business that is located to the area or to that tax site, and the rates that it would pay would be retained locally. So it's about new growth in the area. We can certainly, so I can see Ian Dewhurst has requested a copy of the slides. We'll definitely do that. I'm happy to share those slides, no problem at all. As I say, that micro site will be live shortly, which will have probably you know, the information that I'm on. I'm just looking through the questions again.
Stu, have you seen the
yeah.
one at the top one? Does the Freeport area extend up to the M27 north of Southampton as shown, or confined to the Southampton local authority area?
Yeah, so the Freeport, so the Freeport area is the area in that. Let me just try and share my screen again so it'd be easier. All right, see if that's coming through. I'll try and go back to the map. Is the screen showing for anyone?
It is,
Yeah,
yeah.
brilliant, thanks. There we go. So the white dotted circle is the Solent Freeport area. That is the maximum extent of it. And as you can see here, here's the M27. The science park is around. Whoops, a daisy. Oh God. Right. Right, Science Park is around here. You can see that we've essentially used the M27 here. So junction 3, junction 2. Incidentally, we're talking with Highways England, who are planning works on each of those junctions as well. In the future, they're at an early stage with those works as well, but key critical junctions for us. So yeah, this is the outer extent. In terms of the airport cluster, waterside cluster, and the Portsmouth Gateway cluster, sort of, you know, Dunsbury Park, certainly. I know Portsmouth have come sort of gone public and said that that is a tax site. I know the airport, part of the airport, and the land just to the north of the airport. They've sort of said that they're keen to be tax sites as well. And then there's sort of the waterside cluster that's sort of, you know, in the process of being defined. So I think it's important to just distinguish between tax sites and the Freeport. Tax sites are the areas where those fiscal incentives are attracted to, or that can benefit from those fiscal incentives, not the totality of the area within the white dotted line.
Okay, if I just run through the questions from the top, because it's tricky to be doing all of that at the same time, isn't it? There's a question from Phil about the marine aspect, digitalization, always struggle with that word, shipping, decarbonisation, etc. I assume from what you said earlier that will come out in the next stage of work, the more specifics, the more detail. Yeah,
it will, definitely. What I would say is that there is a requirement, you know, in the bidding prospectus around decarbonisation. So what are your outputs going to be in terms of decarbonisation? Obviously, the country has an ambition to achieve net zero by 2050. I know a number of the local authorities in the area have come out with ambitions to secure net zero by 2030. So significantly, it's not that far away now, really. So yeah, that will be a feature of it. And I think what we need to remember also is that within our area, you know, yeah, there are parts of intense industrialization within our area, but there are, you know, areas of outstanding natural beauty. You know, there really are, sat side by side. We've got a national park, we've got the island biosphere, you know, the South Downs just outside the area, a whole basket of environmental designations, marine and land-based, that make this area so incredibly special. You know, that it's important that we do preserve those as part of the work that we do. So yeah, I mean, you know, decarbonisation is a feature of this, but it's a feature that runs through, I think, everybody's work at the moment. Anyway, I mean, that is the trajectory of travel. We've done a lot of work in the area on green innovation, whether it's in relation to mitigating nitrates going into the Solent to enable housing, whether it's to sort of mitigate the impact of dog walkers on sort of wading birds. You know, we've invested in as an LEP to address those issues. We're just about in the process of agreeing a memorandum of understanding with Environment Agency to work together on a range of issues as well. So that whole environmental, nature-based solutions, decarbonisation, climate change adaptation. You know, we've invested in flood defence in Portsmouth as well, is very much part of our work, because, you know, we need to protect the environment. That is a feature of a resilient Solent economy. And I think, you know, what we've learned from COVID as well, is that people are, going to be not necessarily having to sort of travel into London for work. And I know it was a very small proportion of the Solent working population that travelled into London. I think it's 1%. But this area, given its outstanding natural beauty, has an opportunity to actually attract people to the area, to sort of enjoy the sort of quality of life that the area can provide. But we need good digital infrastructure for that, of course.
Okay, perfect. Nick Farthing, I think we've answered your question. You've asked a question about the money not being quite as good as we thought it might be in advance. Are you happy that we've answered that one?
Hi, Nick.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. Hi, Stuart. Great presentation. Thank you. Yes,
No
thank
problem.
you very much. That's fine.
No problem. Right.
Nice train behind you.
Yeah, lovely. Nice poster. Right, we've talked about the someone's asked about green growth institutes, but I think you've answered ecology rather related questions in the last answer.
Sorry, was that Green Growth Institute, was it,
yeah,
Lorna? Yeah, okay.
Rolf is asking.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can say a little bit on that. Yeah, as I said, we are keen that there is a sort of green element to the Freeport, really keen, and have been all the time, all the way through. What I mean, particularly in relation to innovation, it's quite clear that a lot of the sort of more sort of high value and innovative jobs in the future will be in sort of green tech, and sort of identifying new ways of doing things that are lower in terms of carbon output, and more environmentally sensitive. So in order to make sure that the Solent has the necessary skills to sort of lead in that agenda, and that our population and young people in particular, and people retraining, have the opportunity to be the sort of future green entrepreneurs, then yeah, we're keen to sort of work with partners to establish a Green Growth Institute. Not much more than that at this stage, but that's a pretty good ambition, I think, for the area to have.
Okay, perfect. Pam, I think we've answered your question as well. I just wanted to check that you were happy. Pam Jones? Asking about whether the tax, customs and other benefits apply to existing businesses or whether it's just new businesses. I think
I addressed that one, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Can we have Stuart's slides?
Yeah.
Timeline for implementation soon as, isn't it, Stu?
Yeah, it
this
is.
in place by September?
Yeah, crikey. I wouldn't want to say a date. Government are quite clear that they want the first tax sites or parts of tax sites to be operational this year. As I said, there is some legislation that needs to be enacted first, so that's out of our hands. I've mentioned Dunsbury Park, and I don't know Mark's still on the call, but that is good to go. I mean, it's got a range of infrastructure. It is one of those sites that we were quite keen to get in, so that whilst there will be elements that there might be some work on sites that will have a sort of slower burn time in terms of making them sort of ready. It was keen that we were keen that as part of our proposition we had stuff that could go straight away, and Dunsbury Park is absolutely in that arena. Mark, you've reappeared.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that, I mean, even BioPure, which is part of Watson Marlow, big pharmaceutical company that does manufacture around some essential ingredients for the pharmaceutical process in terms of chemical bits and pieces, they've already said they're going to come to Dunsbury. Well, hopefully next year they could actually come onto the site. So we've even got interest right now. So we're very hopeful that tax site designation will not only make sure those companies come, but they will do future investments as well. And then obviously we've got a lot of site of the Dunsbury Park site to the north, which at the moment hasn't got infrastructure in. The southern bit has, but the northern bit hasn't. So this is a great opportunity to open up the rest of the site, which is a really large tax site. So yeah, it's exciting times, I think, for the whole of the Solent.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that.
Thank you. We've talked about investment and upgrade for the M27. You talked about that already. There was a question about roads, rails, bus and housing, but you've kind of covered that already, I think. There's a question here: if half of the 50,000 jobs will be within the Solent area, where will the others be created?
Yeah, okay, so really good question. So this essentially comes down to sort of multiplier impact, and if we think about the way our ports operate and the role they play for UK PLC, if we take Southampton and Portsmouth, I mean, Ian's on here anyway. He'll be able to talk about where the freight that comes in through the port of Portsmouth goes to in the wider UK. But certainly, if we think about Southampton, it is the leading automotive hub for the UK. So cars manufactured in the East Midlands and north of England, come through Port of Southampton. It is really important for their costs and their access to market that they have an efficient and operating port. So it will support those kind of jobs in wider parts of the UK. Obviously, there are businesses that are reliant on the goods that come in through our ports, both our ports, and that's where the jobs are created. So it's that sort of trickle out effect, the role of our ports as gateways and getting those goods and products either from the UK to market or components from elsewhere into sort of manufacturing hubs in the UK. So the growth that would come from that.
Perfect, thank you. And then there's a next question. Sorry, there's so many questions coming in. I'm struggling to keep up with them a little bit. There was a talk about ammonia and hydrogen and so on. I don't know if you're able to answer that, or whether that's that information will come further along the line.
Yeah, I'm not a chemist, but I can say a little bit about it. It was a really, really good question, because there's a lot of work that's going on with a whole range of partners in relation to hydrogen in particular, and the role that can play in providing the UK's energy needs, there's no reason why and I know there are hubs that have been identified elsewhere, but there's no reason why the Solent could not be in that space. I think in terms of transition of maritime fuels, then yeah, I mean, I'm sure colleagues from the ports will have sort of better insight to that. But ultimately, yes, we need to look at alternative fuels to what are being used at the moment. That is in the sort of Maritime 2050 strategy that government have set out. And we want to play our full role in that, and innovation will be key. And if there's something that the Solent can do to pioneer and lead in that agenda, then that is absolutely where we want to be, of course.
Perfect. A good question here. How will I know if my business is in the right area? It's simply from that map, is it?
Well, no. I mean, the map is specifically general, because, as I said, we have to agree that with government. So we can't say at the moment. I mean, if I can't remember who it was, but if whoever it was wants to sort of email in to us, then certainly inquiries at lep.org.uk. Telling us exactly where their business is. There may be an easy answer, or there may be a sort of less wait and see answer kind of thing. So
it was Robert Hammond.
Okay, well, Robert, if you want to email in, then we'll be able to sort of pick that up specifically.
Okay, and then right, we're getting to the end of this now, and I know you've got another meeting to go to, haven't you? So
fine. It's all right. This is important.
David Robinson, Solent has a large and active marine leisure market with several boat builders and other supporting businesses. Has any specific consideration been given to this sector of marine activity?
Yeah, it definitely has been part of the discussions as we've gone through that. We've had boat builders involved in the task and finish group as well. So we're trying to get views from all parts of the maritime sector, and yeah, I mean, certainly in tax sites as they're designated, certainly those that are sort of fronting the coast, then there is an opportunity, of course, for boat builders there as well. But again, until we can be more specific about the locations, it's hard to say at this stage. But definitely have been part of the consideration. Absolutely, a really important part of the Solent maritime economy.
Perfect. I think we might have got to the end of the questions, or I keep getting another one popping up at the bottom. Yeah, I think the last one was a statement really from Ian. It was a thank you and a statement from Ian Dewhurst. So if there's no other questions, I don't think we've got any other hands up. Thank you for that. We'll get you to come back and talk again as there's more news over time. We're going to run the video, actually. We're going to have a little
crikey, I forgot about the video. Yeah.
Moment.
Yeah.
Oh, have you got it?
Yeah, and I've got it on the end of my slide deck. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. Shall I do it and see if it works?
Yeah, if everyone's got the popcorn ready, let's go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad you said that. I added that in as a late one last night, and Yeah, right. Let me try and share.
Oh, we had it ready to go just
Did
in
you? Oh, well
case.
done.
We did.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. Right. Let's see if I'll tell you what. I reckon the sound won't work if I do it because it never does. Will, if you've got it there, it might be better for you to just do it.
Yes,
I think. Nice one. Cheers. Thank you.
We can't hear it, Will.
There we go.
At the heart of the South Coast lies the nation's global gateway, where the story of our trading heritage meets our trading future, where a new generation of innovators stand ready to catalyze a revolution in maritime, autonomy, and green growth, to level up communities, create jobs and investment across the nation, and build a better future for us all, where opportunity abounds, tourism flourishes, and trade flows, and those who keep us safe proudly call their home, where our heroes fly the flag, in a region where Britain has always led the world. Connected by land, sea, and air, one region stands ready to carry the ambitions of the nation in a bold endeavor to create 52,000 new jobs and generate 3.5 billion GVA. As we set forth building new relationships, united for a global Britain. Solent Freeport. Jobs, trade, investment.
Super, thanks, Will. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I don't know how many of you have seen that video before. I think it's very stirring. It's great. We've got one more poll for you then, which Will will add to the screen. If you could answer that for us. Fantastic. That was the answer we wanted. 100%. Excellent. We'll pass. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Stu, for that, and we'll get you back at another time to give us an update. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
No problem.
Thanks, Stu.
Now we're within time, and I might finish early. Actually, I've just got a little bit of updates for you. We have you might have seen in the newsletters or on social media, there's a well-being offer that is in place for local businesses to take advantage of for their staff teams. The Brexit support offer is still in place. We ran a very successful Pioneers Innovation event last week, which we were delighted with. It went extremely well, but watch this space for more information about that. In terms of careers and outreach work, Siobhan and I have been developing the sort of development plan for the next year's work. We're still very keen to involve local employers with education establishments. So we've talked before about enterprise advisor vacancies. There are still schools and colleges out there who are asking for a business person to link with them to help them develop their careers offer and their careers program. I had a meeting with someone from Kinetic a few weeks ago, and he said, you know, we complain as employers that we're not able to employ the people to come in, the people pipeline without the right skills and attitudes and behaviours. And because of that, I get involved with school and college work to help shape careers programs. So there is always vacancies for enterprise coordinator, enterprise advisors. And if that's something that you feel you could do, we'd be very happy to hear from you. One last little thing, the Chamber of Shipping have plans in place for the Maritime Tourism Summit to be based in the Solent this year. We're looking at September. If it goes ahead as a face-to-face event, and it's obviously, we don't know what's happening, we hope that these things will be happening. It's likely to coincide with London International Shipping Week, which is week commencing the 13th of September, and that would be our event really for Maritime UK Solent that week. So I'll keep you up to date with developments on that as it moves along. But Maritime Tourism Summit, September 2021. Fantastic. And I think that's your final poll. So unless there's any further questions from anybody, we'll look forward to seeing you on the 21st of April at 9 o'clock. Been absolutely delighted with the attendance today. That has blown my mind. So really pleased with that. Thank you for your attention and your questions, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.